Peace, y'all. It's Matthew here. Tuesday, the 16th September. Finally, we got a clean air, and it's a joy to be out here with the sun shining and the air is clean. Can breathe again. So here we are. I'm standing on the row in between the nopal and the cabbage, seeing the work some folks did with that mulch, and it's looking really great. I love how thick you guys put the mulch in. Now, the challenge that we're having here, and one of the things to think about whenever you are designing your own space, is design and what you're putting where. And so here we have this row of nopal cactus, which is a beautiful perennial cactus, really drought resistant, doesn't need water, doesn't need very much care, can provide you a lot of food. Like to eat these tender pads right here. It can also eat the fruits, these tunas, when they get orange or red. See, like that's perfect. It's a great plant, but in a high intensive urban agricultural setting, I don't know about putting this in between rows that we're cultivating. And the reason being is these little things right here make it very difficult to get in between and weed. So I noticed folks came through and mulched. The challenge that we're gonna have with these nopals is these weeds in between. And we're gonna really have to get in here on our hands and knees and get poked and pull these by hand. And that is incredibly labor intensive. Otherwise, this fennel, which you see is starting to flower, is gonna make these seeds, and each one of these turns into a seed. So one fennel plant will make over 100 seeds, and look at all the plants. If we multiply that by 50 to 100 plants, that's thousands of fennel seeds, and that's an invasive plant that will be reproducing right here. And so that's why the focus is on this perennial area, because when you're not cultivating the soil, it's a lot easier for these noxious weeds to take root and take hold. And you can see as well with the tree collars, same thing's happening. Under the tree collars, we have this dandelion, which is a beautiful plant, very healthy and medicinal, but it's also, it will take over. It is a weed. And we have this other dandelion-like plant. We have this nightshade, which they call yerba mora. I guess the folks in El Salvador, Guatemala, they eat this. I've never tried it. And then we have the fennel again. And so that's really the issue that I'm noticing out here. More and more as we get in and get down into the nitty-gritty, look at the details, is we have this weed layer, this noxious weed layer that's just kind of persisting. And it's gonna be a problem on the rest of the space if we don't do anything about it. So while the mulch is really thick and beautiful here, the work that really we need to do is to actually throw it in here. But we want first to remove the weeds, and then we're gonna put a nice thick foot layer deep of mulch. We could cover the irrigation, it doesn't matter. We don't need to see this irrigation. We're not gonna be cultivating in here. We're not gonna be digging because these are perennials. And so we're gonna mulch them really heavily. And that way when we remove these weeds, this patch, these patches, and we mulch it really thick, hopefully the mulch is so thick that the weeds that are already in the soil from this year, last year, the year before, they can't germinate once it rains. That's gonna be the big thing out here, y'all. Once it rains, these weeds are gonna take off. We're in the warm season, the dry season. It's been hot and sunny. And the only reason these plants are still growing is because of this irrigation line. But once it rains, we're gonna have weeds all up in the path, all up in the path. And this mint, while it is lovely and beautiful smelling, it is a pain in the butt, and it will take over. And so that's why I'm really highlighting that this is important work. It's gritty work, it's ugly work, it is not glamorous at all, but it is so important. Unless we decide that these nopals need to come out, we gotta figure out what we're gonna do with the weeds that are growing between them. So I just really wanted to take a minute and speak on that, because it is so important. And then you can come over 2 rows over and you can see, can't really tell what's growing in here. And that's the issue. That should never be happening on your farm. You can't tell what it is because there's too much stuff in there. Same right here. So in this row, these are greens, collard greens it looks like. and maybe some type of mustard green or some type of other green. But again, there's no weed management. So we have tomatoes that have volunteered in here. We have this lamb's quarters that's in here. We have this yerba mora. We have this mallow. We have this amaranth. And while it looks beautiful, it's not what ideal situation for growing food. If we're planting these greens, then that's what we want to prioritize and take out everything else. Because ultimately the tomatoes are a weed, the amaranth is a weed, and those weeds are making it harder for us to grow and get greens. And so that's kind of the big thing that is really just taking hold out here, is this wild garden. And so again, you can see the greens in the front, and then it gets a little overgrown. And so as we march our way down, you'll notice other areas that have just kind of gotten a little wild. And so while we do want to rewild and reclaim wilderness, because being wild is a good thing to some degree, we need order on our food forest, on our farm. We need order. And as you were highlighting, Sister B, row 21, it was looking a little disorderly, and that's exactly the plan. We came through, we wanted to come and focus on fixing this row. And so what we did today was we put some more kale out here. We got some zoo poop from our Peralta friends. I appreciate them for coming through with that. And then we got a nice thick layer. And then noticing the black-eyed peas are gone. Must have been a good amount of work. So appreciate that work there. And so really the focus now as we transition to fall is going to be cleaning up and re-transitioning our beds to plant for fall. And so even some of these areas in which we are more heavily managing, you'll see the weed pressure is tough. Like, we can't stay on top of the weeds. It's too much. It's too much weed seed in the soil. There's too much. And so wanted to highlight again different technique, a different approach. Since we have not a lot of labor, since we have a lot of space, you'll notice that we are actually spacing our plants significantly. So there's a lot of area in between each plant, and that's to help us when we do need to come through and weed. So for example, here, we're doing 2 kales, every other emitter. Over here, we did 3 cabbages at every emitter. So this is way denser right here. This is less dense. Now, you can also see there's a lot of weeds right here, and that's because with the density, you're not going to be able to come in with the hoe and get in there and weed that. So that's the plan here, is that we're going to stay on top of these weeds, and we're going to use our tools to weed them. And so as we continue in this work, really what we want to do now is whatever is growing, come through and weed. So we're going to continue to weed along these edges. That's really important. And then again, getting under these perennials. Row number 10, collard greens. There's Bermuda grass in there. We've come through and removed some of it, but there's still Bermuda grass. If we leave any of it, that stuff's gonna come back once it rains. Row number 8 should be greens. It looks like there's 2 rows of greens, and so everything else can come out. Row number 7 was gonna be tomatillos. They're not looking so hot. I think we should take it out. Row number 6 is the nopals, and again, we gotta come through underneath, weed that, and then put that mulch all the way up at the base of those nopals. Push it all the way in at every little crack. And we'll do the same thing here with these tree collars, so that where we remove the calendula, that soil should not be exposed. We're covering it with wood chips. Then you'll see over here, there is this horseradish, and there's this rhubarb here. So this is the rhubarb, and then as we come down, there's horseradish. And honestly, don't really have a plan. Anybody who's interested in rhubarb or horseradish, there's an abundance. Like, there's a ton of rhubarb. So come through. You want to get some rhubarb? Let's do it. Or you want to make some wasabi, get some spice with your horseradish? Let's do it. So come harvest. Come take some flowers. Come pick some weeds. Thanks y'all. Much love. Peace.